Hi, my name is Avni Santani. I am of Indian origin. I moved to the UK for University of Aberdeen in United States 25 years ago, and working and studying at Aberdeen has one of my fondest memories, and I'm looking forward to speaking to you all more about it. I've trained as a medical geneticist, and I've been in the field of healthcare and genetics for about 20 years. Look forward to
Yes.
speaking to you.
Thank you very much. And why did you choose University of Aberdeen?
I really wanted to study more the field of medical genetics,
Mhm.
and I was based in India back then, and we just didn't have enough options. And one of my friends actually had gone to study genetic counseling, and she recommended the university. And I'd heard a lot about the professors and the work being done in genetics there, and that's why I applied.
And why did you choose to study particularly genetics?
So, human health and detection of disease was always front and center of my mind since I was in undergrad. And so, what I wanted to learn was how can you apply genetics and the knowledge of genetic testing to help people who are sick? And
Mhm.
it could be a child who has epilepsy or hearing loss or brain malformations, or it is somebody who has cancer, like a 50-year-old. And so that was my interest. And so taking the master's degree in Aberdeen was my first step towards the journey of using genetics for diagnostics.
Very interesting. And apart from your education and studying, are there any favorite memories from Aberdeen? Maybe from like social aspect of living in Aberdeen and studying there?
Oh, I have so many. I think some of the best times of my life were living in Aberdeen. I think it was the first time I left my country and reached an environment where every member of my classroom was from a different country. And I just really enjoyed getting to know different cultures. We made lifelong friendships. I'm still in touch with so many of my classmates. And in terms of activities, as students, we did a lot of things together, including we joined like a Kaylee dancing club. And I remember going like every weekend to learn how to dance. And we attended weddings, we went on hikes. It was just marvelous. It was one of the best times of my life.
That's great. And can you share with us like your experience at other educational institutions you studied at? Like how they were different from Aberdeen?
Sure. So after I finished my master's degree, I applied to go to grad school and get a PhD in genetics to the United States. And so it was a very different experience in many ways from my undergrad in Mumbai University to my grad school career in Aberdeen to doing a PhD in Texas. And so my first foray was getting into Texas A&M University, moving to Houston and College Station. And then after I finished my PhD, I applied for a postdoctoral fellowship and moved to Philadelphia. And
Mhm.
that was a very different experience as well. And I'd say every step of the way, it was not only the obvious, which is enhancing your knowledge, really deepening your field of expertise, but it was the rigor that a good scientific education puts in you. Like, how do you become a rigorous scientist? How do you publish papers? How do you design great studies? How do you network? And so it really made me, I feel like a well rounded professional, especially being exposed to different universities, not just being in the same schooling environment my whole life.
And what were your career aspirations while studying the University of Aberdeen? What did you want to do in the future? Did you always know that you would want to into your career field?
Yes, I'm one of those lucky people who had a dream and then by a series of events was able to actually live her lifelong career dream. So I always wanted to do clinical diagnostic genetic testing. And I remember being in Mumbai, actually, not even in Aberdeen, saying, well, let's work backwards and say, well, how do I have a career and run a lab? And let's work backwards from there. And I said, okay, I think I need at least a master's and a PhD, and then we'll take it from there. But yeah, I always wanted to use genetic testing for the betterment of human health.
Interesting.
That's what
So,
I do now.
and do you think studying in different countries, yes, broaden your perspective of like medical field, like genetics.
Absolutely. Yeah, it broadens your perspective in every way. I feel like you meet very different people, very different cultures. The way science is conducted is very competitive, especially it's the same in the UK and United States. But where I ended up training after my PhD was at CHOP, which is a Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And I'll give you an example. I had no idea how prestigious the institution was until I actually started working there. But it ended up being the one of the best children's hospitals in the world. And that's where I did my postgraduate fellowship. And so I ended up seeing a lot of cases, a lot of patients who were so rare that they were like the only family in the whole world who had a specific genetic condition, or that they were all there looking for answers. And so my education, my exposure, my understanding of genetic disease was just broadened because of being at the right place at the right time. Like if I had not been at CHOP, I don't know if my training would have been that rigorous. At the same time, because it's one of the best hospitals in the country, the expectation as you being a fellow and a trainee is you have to be the best. You have to be at the top of your game. So it challenged me in ways that I was not used to being challenged in the past. And it really forced me to like step up my game. And I really appreciate that because I firmly believe like I'm a better professional geneticist because of the exposure I had to Aberdeen and my training in the US.
This is very impressive. And can you tell us a little bit more about your time at the University of Pennsylvania?
Yeah, sure. So my training completed in about after 3 years, and then I was offered to stay on and run the diagnostic lab at CHOP. And eventually I applied and received a professor position at the University of Pennsylvania. And just like CHOP, I feel like it's a really terrific institution. You're surrounded by basically the best in the business. And don't underestimate the value of that because that network of people that you meet really ground you and are there for you for the rest of your life. They are your friends, your colleagues. You can learn so much from your peers, sometimes more so than you can learn from your professors and your mentors. And so, again, like CHOP, I felt like Penn, being one of the best schools in the country, really demanded the best. So, in order to be a successful faculty member, you start at assistant professor, you then climb up the levels. And in order to climb up the levels, you have to demonstrate that you're meeting all the clinical research and teaching requirements, which really have to be close to excellent in order for you to move forward. I found that incredibly rewarding. It was stressful because you are pushing yourself to do this. You're in or you're out. That's how faculty appointments work. And again, I feel like I became a much better scientist because now I had goals to meet and I was with people in the room who were very, very good at what they did. And it inspired me to push myself to do better.
That's very interesting. And how did you get involved with Let's Get Checked? And what do you do there?
Yeah, so I spent about 15 years in academia at Penn, and I was thoroughly enjoying my time there. But I wanted to be more on the business end of things. I felt like I enjoyed research and teaching quite a bit, but I also wanted to now see where we could take healthcare, where we could expand our horizons, and where we could move maybe innovatively at a scale that is faster and bigger. And industry is probably the better setting for something like that. So
Mhm.
I joined a smaller startup called Veritas Genetics, which was a genome company. And then after 2 years of working there, that company was acquired by Let's Get Checked, and Let's Get Checked offered me a role to essentially run their genomics initiatives. And obviously, I took it because I believe in the mission of the company.
Mhm.
So let me tell you a little bit more about the company. So the Let's Get Checked is a digital healthcare solutions company. We work with millions of patients really around the world, and we offer integrated healthcare solution testing anywhere from diabetes management to cancer management. And the company firmly believes to make healthcare accessible from the comfort of the home. And I believe we are pioneers in that space. And so our biggest, I think, goal is how do we make access to routine healthcare accessible to a patient? Doesn't matter if they have low literacy or if they live in parts of the world where they can't access these tests, we'll make it easy for you to access routine healthcare. So I'm very excited about the mission of the company and playing a small role in moving it forward.
That's very interesting. And could you please walk us through your day-to-day work routine? What do you do?
So many different things, but essentially I oversee our genomics initiatives, and it's a very collaborative, positive atmosphere in the company. So we work across a team of scientists who develop genetic tests. We are leveraging sort of the latest technology, the latest AI tools, the latest bioinformatics to make cancer tests, for example. So our latest project was launching a genetic test for hereditary cancer, which means any patient who has born with a genetic mutation that puts them at increased risk, we can help identify it and then help you make management or treatment decisions based on your genetic profile. And because cancer is, I think, the second most common condition in the world in terms of mortality and morbidity, there's a lot of interest in that. So to me, the mission of doing this really speaks to me. I was telling my team yesterday that I'm one of those few people who loves coming to work on Monday morning because I really truly enjoy doing what I do. So part of that was how do we continue to offer better tests to our patients? Then my other day-to-day is we work with multiple teams across the company to ensure that the products that we develop are accessible to our clients, our patients, and that we're doing everything correctly. So maybe it's a webinar to talk about cancer. Maybe it is meetings with product to continue to develop genetic testing products. And then I'm also very involved with compliance and regulatory activities so that everything we offer is safe for
Mhm.
our patients and, of course, for our employees as well. So that, in a nutshell, is the day to day. It's a lot of meetings.
That's very interesting. You had a very impressive career, but what was the proudest moment in your career, in your opinion?
I'm I A lot of families have retrospectively reached out to me
Hmm.
because at some point we had given them a diagnosis for a disease. And a lot of my life's work has been focused actually on rare diseases. So it's
Yeah.
really young children who are born with super rare conditions, and the parents are trying to find an answer. Why did this happen? Is it something I did during my pregnancy? Is this a mistake I made? How
Hmm.
can I help my child? What are my next steps? And when it's a rare disease, most doctors do not know what's happening because they've never seen it before. And so it's this dilemma and this agony that families are facing. And using genetics, we've been able to at least resolve the diagnostic odyssey for them, which is they've spent years and years looking for answer, and we could finally give them an answer. Getting feedback back from these families about what the results have meant to them is what keeps me going day to day, because it means my work is having an impact. It's helping patients, and it's one N of one. Like even if it's one person reaching out to me, it means the world to me. So I'd say we have had many, 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 of course, diagnoses that we have made, and any one of these conversations really brings meaning to my life and what I do.
I'm very proud of you. That's
Oh,
very
thank you.
good.
Thank you,
And
Madhu.
the next question is, what emerging technologies or methodologies do you believe will have the greatest impact on your industry in medicine, genetics?
AI probably will, for sure. I think it's going to completely change how any of us live our lives. We are looking at AI in very strategic ways right now to see how it can impact healthcare. There are so many bottlenecks in healthcare where you can use AI to make just accessibility again, right? Like that's what we are focused on, making healthcare accessible. But so I'm super excited about AI and the responsible use of AI. In addition, our in genetics, there is just a lot going on with sequencing and how do we take this data and how do we make better sense of this data using advanced machine learning. And so there's a lot of activity and interest. And then outside genetics, there's a field called multi-omics, which is
Mhm.
our proteome and our metabolome. And there are all these parts of our body that is not just DNA that can help influence how we detect disease and manage disease. So I know this is very nerdy and probably won't make sense to many of you, but I'm super excited about using really more of biology to help with understanding how human diseases progress.
That's very interesting. Thank you. And what advice would you give to our students who want to go into the similar career field as you're in?
Don't be afraid to just take risks. I started as a 20-year-old in Mumbai. I had no connections. I had no money, and I had actually limited family support. My family was not really in favor of me leaving the country to go. And if you are really passionate about the cause and you believe in yourself, the world is literally your oyster. I felt like if I was willing to outwork anybody in the room, that was probably my biggest going in strength is I'll work harder than anybody in the room. And I refused to give up. Those were probably the two things because you will face a lot of challenges, but just take that first step, take the leap. If you're really interested in something, don't be afraid to ask. And I've always reached out to like a network of people, even if I didn't know them, and so many of them respond back. So don't be afraid to make a network, reach out to people you don't know, don't hesitate to ask for introductions, but your network is going to be your biggest strength career wise moving forward.
That's very interesting. And would you recommend for our students to seek additional either internships or like certificates, like to to improve their chances of getting like a job eventually?
Yeah, so everything depends on two things. One is like where you want to be in your
Mhm.
career. So I don't know how many people do this, but I personally started with where do I want to be 30 years from now and then worked backwards because it helped me make different decisions than if I started saying, oh, I have my undergrad, what do I do next?
Yeah.
You make different decisions when you know that your end goal is somewhere here. And so based on that, I think everything comes together. So obviously, the more work experience you have before you start looking for jobs, the better it's reflected. Doing an internship, whether paid or unpaid, as long as you do a good job and that person is willing to give you a good reference, which almost everybody will, especially if you're doing a great job, it can only help build a network. In
Yeah.
terms of like professional licenses, it all depends on this 30-year plan, right? So if your goal is, my goal was, I do want to be licensed so I can do diagnostic testing. So I always knew I had to get a professional license. And then I worked backwards from that, saying, well, I'm going to need a PhD to qualify to do the fellowship in
Yeah.
order to qualify to get the license. So licenses help, but it depends on your field. Like it
Mhm.
changes all the time. For example, now I'm doing a lot more like management stuff, and I wish maybe earlier in my life I had taken more courses for management and
Yeah.
licenses in finance. So it depends on your own career prospects, but if you do end up doing an internship or any kind of opportunity that's related to work, remember you're always being graded. Your
Hmm.
brand is your brand. How you show up will matter and people will remember it for years and years and years. So as long as you show up and do a great job and you maintain your relationships with your people, that brand will not suffer, but be aware of your brand.
That's very interesting. Thank you. And how do you manage your team effectively? Any
It's
advice on that?
it's probably the hardest thing to do because you're trained as a scientist or as an engineer or a doctor, but very few people actually train you to be an effective manager or leader. And so I feel like I read a lot about effective team management. And one of the two things is maybe I probably won't go into a lot of details, but One is being a servant leader, which is being at the service of your team, making sure they have the tools and the resources they need to succeed, showing empathy. A lot of us come to work, we only speak of work, we don't talk about our personal lives, but maybe there is something going on in their lives that's affecting how they're showing up to the meeting. So just having an emotional IQ about what else might be affecting our team members in terms of how they are being uh, how they're showing up to work. And then really openness, transparency in communication, making sure they understand they're being valued, their work is valued, they know what the mission of the company is, and being in touch with them. Those are probably the three things I say I continue to work on today.
Yeah, that's very
That's
interesting.
my personal goal.
And are there any books or resources you would recommend for our students? It can be career or non-career related. Maybe something that inspires you.
Yeah, so Adam Grant is a professor at UPenn, and he has
Mhm.
written at least three books. So any book by Adam Grant
Mhm.
is great. The Tipping Point is a great book. Dale Carnegie's book is amazing. Um, I read a lot of books on like career growth and management. So maybe one of the things I'd say is I have invested a lot in my own education outside of like my scientific education, whether it is investing in an executive coach or whether it's
Mhm.
investing in a finance course or taking a course at Wharton on leadership and strategy. Any of those investments, including buying books, will pay off. And so maybe try to pick any of these books and read them. Read one great book a month, whether it's audio or not, it doesn't matter. But just investing in your own education really should be like a lifelong effort. That's what I believe.
Thank you very much. And the last question is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I'd say don't hesitate to take more risks.
Mhm.
Go all in, and the worst thing that can happen is it doesn't work out, but you will still learn a lot from the experience. I did take a lot of risks when I was younger, but in retrospect, I feel like I could have taken maybe more risks. So that's probably the biggest advice I'll give myself. And then the second is maybe stay in the present, stop worrying about the future. Future will happen whether you like it or not, but being in the present and really enjoying the success of that moment, whatever it may be, um, it really just centers you and makes you more effective as a person. Not thinking about the past, not thinking about the future, but just being focused in the present.